if you imagine a twig floating down a creek and how it can get stuck between two rocks, or it just flows around like the water is going to take you, right? The water is going to take you. Whatever it is, the water will be part of the flow.
I'm so happy, Debbie, that you were able to speak with me today. I really appreciate having the time to talk to you about the work that you do.
Thank you. I'm excited to be a part of this. I'm excited to even learn more about what got you to do this.
Well, you first, and then if there's time after you. But that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I would be happy to tell you as much as I am able to know why I'm doing this. I would be happy to share that with you.
Yeah, that's the big why.
Okay, well, let's start. We'll start with you. When did you first start taking photographs?
At the age of 8, my parents gave me a small Agfomatic camera, so that this 120, film, the millimeter film, and it was this little plastic box, and on top you put this cube for a flash, and every time you'd advance it, it would shift and turn around. But when you click it, it would make this great popping sound because it was like a real old-fashioned, authentic flash cube that would then, all these chemicals would come out. It was kind of fun how that happened. As a kid, you'd be like, "Oh, I've got control of this." There's a control aspect to it, which I'm not even realizing until just now as we're talking about it. Photographers like to control things. Artists like to control things. We control things within our frame. And it's an interesting thing to think about it emotionally too, and in our own lives. Is there something that we're wanting to control? A big question to ask, actually.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. That's interesting. So when you think about your process as a photographer, where do you see control? There's probably different places that control plays a role in the overall process of taking and producing your photos. Where can you see control coming in?
Well, it's interesting. It's a cool little tangent that we're going on because there must be a complete freedom before there's the control. Kind of like if you think we must learn, I guess, aspects of rules and foundation of different things in life in order to know when we can break them or go around them. So we get these parameters and then we can understand how we can push the parameters. When I know what the project is, I have great direction, but there's a fluidity and a freedom and a looseness to then creating the work. Everything is on the fly and you just have to be ready for it. And it's exciting. It's a very exciting thing. It's, and when it comes, sometimes you don't know. Like one time I was in Manhattan and just we're doing street photography with a cinematographer. And then suddenly they walked into us. It was a Chinese funeral procession. And I had never seen anything like it. And suddenly we were literally in the middle of it. So then we became a part of it. So that's where sort of that freedom is and the looseness. And then you take on the skills that you have and then you use them to implement. So where is there control? There's control in the camera if you know the camera. But then you go to when you're going to cull and edit the images. There's control as what you're going to choose. And of course, stepping back, there's control with what I put in my image. I'm controlling what I put. But within street photography and reportage, other types of things where it's moving very quickly, every shot that I get isn't going to be exactly what I want. It's just not even possible. So, but But let's say if I'm doing landscape, I control everything in my landscape shot. There's nothing really moving. I'm setting it up. I'm waiting for the right lighting. That's complete control. So back to the other scenario, when I'm editing, I'm now choosing the images that have every component and the composition that I want in that shot. I am directing the viewer with what I want them to see. So when I know I have that in the image, now I'm going to work, and if it needs work, I'm going to work with enhancing my contrast with my light, my dark, the chiaroscuro. Where do I really want that you, the viewer, to see my work? And so I am now the puppeteer and going to manipulate you as the viewer in my storytelling. So it happens in post in that way, and then it continues really, because it doesn't stop there, because then now we're in a digital age. So then it's how because that's then how I'm going to be printing the work.
So if you think over the different places where you control the process and those multiple points, where do you see the role maybe of the happy accident? Are there moments when something turns out differently than you intended it to, and then you think, oh, actually I like that. Maybe that's not what I was deliberately, consciously going for, but then here it is, and I really like the way that came out.
Yeah. Well, it's there are different kinds of happy accidents. Some would just be when, like, as you say, it comes together and you think it's a mistake. It could be how the film was processed, if you're talking about analog film, and how it was processed, and you're like, oh my gosh. Or, there's been times where actually, let's say I was rolling my film back and I was doing a double exposure, and then I didn't realize I had only gone like a third of the way or something like that. And then it creates something. So that is a happy accident in that way. And at the same time, let's just say I have an idea. Like when I'm making my work, it comes from expression or curiosity. And knowing that, I then can let it go, and then just be where I am and allow my surroundings to then bring me to what, I guess, the expression of what I might be thinking or feeling. And so even though I don't know what it is necessarily, and then I play and tweak with what's in front of me, then it appears like I can find that, oh, well, I've been doing whatever, such and such is. And now I'm seeing a style, I'm seeing a something that is happening again and again. And so it's actually telling me that I've actually latched on to something, and there's something more. So I often find, which is kind of cool, Sarah, it's this idea that I have to catch up to my work.
That's a nice way of putting it. That's interesting.
Yeah, the work teaches me. I go intuitively, and then I find that there is something thematic, and then I have to sit with it and say, oh yeah, wow. And that's the fun part. And so it's not necessarily a happy accident, right? But sure is happy. And it's coming where it's that idea of it isn't known until it's known.
Is there a recent project, an example that you can share of where you saw that theme evolving through your work as you did it?
Yeah, well, so my project for Seeable Cash is about, well, it's a meditative project. I didn't know, like I say, I'm describing, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And just so you know, it's a conjured term for Seeable Cash, for let the knowing of what you already know come to you. It's like you already know something, and then it's sort of that remembering of what you know, that awareness of what you know. And so what's kind of interesting, the title would in a sense be a description of exactly what we're talking about. I'll step back in that a lot of my work is I do double exposure in camera, and I call it a pairing of images. And there's the intent is that they have a meaning depending on the project. So I've been doing this a lot in all different ways and different types of projects. But with foreseeable cash, uh, um, I do a lot of road trips, and so I have a road trip series, and that's just one image. But while I was out and shooting landscape, which I love to do, and I happened to be in Monument Valley when this one began, I was enamored by the meditative, I guess, energy of these sacred American lands. And as soon as I stepped onto this red dirt, it's like everything was quiet. There's no one around us. And I made an image, and I was on my, I can't remember now. Now this was this one was intentional. It wasn't one of those happy accidents that you're saying, where, like, let's say I actually had it on the wrong mode and then suddenly created one. It wasn't that kind. I had put it on, doing my double exposure, and so I had this one image. Let's say it was of the right mitten, and then I moved my camera then to get the left mitten into the shot. So now I'm creating this new view of something that's photographed, millions and millions and millions of times in such recognizable landscape. Um, and so what it came to be, that as I'm making this work, it got me even more grounded and more serene and more quiet. And I would I only have like a minute, maybe two, to make that second shot, because I'll then lose it. For different reasons, it can happen that I can lose it. So the one shot's very important, but I have to also frame it in a way where I know I can fill it on the other side or pair it some way. And that happens with practice, that I know what I want to do, even though I don't know what the next shot's going to be. I have to set myself up. Then I just literally turn and walk around. I don't like walk around, like I will just turn and left and right and see what feels good. And then I have to make that decision. Am I going to zoom into that next shot? Is it going to be the same depth or not? Am I going to zoom out? And then it just fits together. And, kind of like, two hands coming together in prayer. It's just this sense of coming together. And that, to me, the whole experience of it is meditation and meditative. What came to me afterwards was I ended up adding, I call them veils. I would put a strip, one or two, mostly just one, and the strip would be something you could see through, and it was like a portal of being sort of in this present state of mind to then a meditative state of mind. And so going through from one state to another, and also that sense of, here we have double exposure, and there's also the double meaning of the portal of walking in and out, but also when we meditate, there is that we are here, and we might have that focus on the breath, but we're also going to hear chatter in the mind, and then you're also going to hear a car outside or a dog barking or a person or a radio. That's always something going on. There's always something going on. So there's meaning to every bit that's put into the image, each image.
I may be like overthinking it, but there was a way when you started talking about meditation, where meditation, and I'm not a good meditator at all. I'm like a baby step. Like I really try for 10 minutes to not let my mind
It's
go
hard.
like a hamster.
Yeah.
It is hard. I find it challenging.
I mean, you're saying 10 minutes. It's probably even 10 seconds, because it happens right away.
Okay, that's true. That's fair.
For me too. I mean, honestly, for most people to be able to meditate for 1 minute without having that chatter come in, is not many people can do that.
No. But it's interesting as a practice, because in a way it's deliberate. So there's certain things that you try to do, and it's also emergent at the same time, because you're not sure where that's going to take you, or you're not sure what's going to come to you next, or you're not sure what the process, where it's going to lead you. I find
Yeah.
anyway in meditation. And then I find your process as a photographer is similar, where there's a very deliberate, controlled aspect to it. But in that moment, when you have 1 minute and you're just turning and something intuitively in you says, that's the second shot, that feels more emergent, right? Because that can't be planned, though. There's the
Yes.
part that's deliberate
Yeah.
and then there's the part that just comes from you. And I find that balance
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. I like to hear you say it that way. It's so true. It's even with meditation, and just so you know, I'm not one of those people that within 1 minute that those thoughts don't come in. They come in, and that's the thing. It's we're not trying to stop the thoughts. We're human. They're going to come in. It's more about being okay with them. So in the sense, and you know what I mean. We're not trying to be other than we are. And so with photography, it's the same that as you're describing when I'm taking that second shot, it cannot be controlled, just like the meditation cannot be controlled. You have to let it flow. Everything. Think about life, thinking about the breath, it we breathe, the body breathes to us.
That's
What
right.
are we really in control of? Not much.
No, and as I get older, I realize it's less and less and less than I
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
thought. um, that's leading me in a way to ask, and I think you're in a way, you're talking about this, and especially sort of having chosen meditation as a kind of a subject matter, and in those moments in the landscape, taking those pictures in that way. What do you think your work reveals about you, or what are you learning about yourself in the process of doing these pieces?
Well, let me start back to tell you, because I had a conversation just last night with a film student, and she was asking me about her work and certain things, and I I was telling her with my photography, and this would be in my 40s when I started shooting in a different way. I found that by looking at the work, I was learning about myself. I was learning about where I was in my life, what was going on, and it was like a mirror of things that I like a mirror. Let's say you walk by a mirror and you don't look. I hadn't looked in the mirror for a long time, and then those photographs were showing me myself. I got to learn about where I was in my life, and then I got to see as I shot differently that I was changing. And something else that I absolutely adore is hearing someone talk about my work when a viewer is looking at that work, or even a friend who's looking at the work and then they talk about it. Um, they'll share things with me that I couldn't know about because it's all subjective. And I love that. I just adore that part of the practice. And because I was asking this one person yesterday, I said, she was asking me about this image of mine. And I said, well, what do you see? And she told me what she saw. And I said, that's what it is.
That's cool. It's cool because it just is dovetailing with something that occurred to me in the last day or two. But when I first started doing this podcast, it was about speaking with artists and creators of work and what it means to them. And I'm realizing that there's the other side of it is, as viewers, what does it mean to us? Like, what is it for me to look at your photographs, or for me to look at somebody's sculptures or somebody's building that they designed? What is happening for me in that experience? And it could be something very different than what's happening for you. And I hadn't thought about
Yeah.
the podcast from that perspective, but I find that really interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I'll share one of my first conceptual project is, I think it was 2012. I can't remember the year. It's called Seen and Heard, and Seen is SCENE. And I myself was a film student. And so this makes sense that the first project has this sense of being filmatic and cinematic. And so what I did was and it was so organic the way this came, when you talk about a happy accident. We can say that, but it's just we're let's say, you're walking somewhere, you're walking somewhere, you don't know where it's going to end up. That's the happy accident in a sense.
Yeah.
So I'm shooting these sort of desolate scenes in the desert, and they are of different structures that may have been abandoned, or just sort of obscure. And there are no people in these shots, but they're all very human centric because humans have made these structures. And what I did was, in this class, here we are being pushed to make something conceptual. I'm like, how do I do it? What do you do? How do you make something conceptual? I was, I was a street photographer, so it was all something very simple and right in front. I wouldn't plan it. Well, I had begun, before I shot those images, I'd begun writing snippets of overheard conversation, and that would be in Los Angeles. So it's nowhere near the desert. I mean, we're in the desert, but nowhere near where I was taking these images. And one day I decided to put these snippets together with these other images. And then, so what I did was, I'm breathing new life into these images that have nothing to do with the text. And now I'm breathing in a new context to the conversation. It's being taken out of context and making a new context. And so I put them together with the images. And this was the most fun for me, because hearing the viewers interpret the work, everyone, of course, has their own thoughts about what it means. And to your point, what you were talking about earlier with the viewer, everything that makes us who we are, our parents, where we grew up, our mood, everything we've experienced in life up to the time we are going to look at a piece of artwork will influence us. So something you might feel really have a great positive visceral reaction to one day, another day you may not, because of your mood or a circumstance that may have happened. So it's just, I just loved hearing people say things like, one of the images had a swing set in it, and the conversation that I had chosen for that was something to the effect of, I'm loving you so hard right now. And some people looked at it and saw it kind of gave them chills, like it was very uncomfortable. And other people looked at it with fondness and memory. And the voice, because this is interesting, the person who said it was a child was just saying it to somebody, and that was how they were speaking. They didn't know how to say it. And so that's, I'm loving you so hard right now. But someone else could interpret it in a very extreme way. And so it's just fascinating interpretation and how we see things. I just love that.
I think it's interesting what you said about how in a moment I might interpret something one way, and then maybe if I'd seen it a day later, I would interpret it differently because my mood is different or something's different about the circumstances. And then maybe also interesting how over time, if I look at the same piece when I'm 20 and I look at it when I'm 35 and I look at when I'm 53,
Yeah.
it's also going to evolve just based on my trajectory as a person. If I'm changing, which hopefully, we are
We
evolving,
all are. Yeah. Yeah.
then
In
that
one way or
piece
another.
changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like reading a book, there are books that at one point may be too dense for us, or another point it's an easy read, but you're only going to take in the parts that you're meant to really take in and absorb. And so there's some of those books that are just great to read again, because, oh wow, I didn't even pick up on that nuance or that part of the story. And that's kind of a cool experience to do a little, I guess, a little, a test to see when you read it, how might it be different reading it again now?
Yeah. And it's almost back to our control and emergent because, I bought the book or I took the book out of the library or I chose to pick it up off my bookshelf. So I'm determined. I'm determinate in that. But what I'm going to
Right.
get from the reading, what emerges from that, I have no control over that. And it might be something that's completely different if I read the book 10 years ago to how I feel now.
Yeah.
And I can't
Yeah.
control that.
Well, and so that brings me to an interesting thought of expectation. You know, the more expectations we have, the more let down we'll get.
Yeah.
And versus, okay, I'm going to have an experience and just let it come.
That's right. And actually, the corporate version of that, because I work as a consultant, is under promise, over deliver, under promise, over deliver, set low expectations so that you can hope to meet them or exceed them if you're lucky.
You got it. Absolutely. Yeah. So, what, you know, tell me about vulnerability and how you came to have that be sort of the focus of these talks.
Um, I guess that's so that would be a little bit my evolution as a consultant in my day job. So I design learning programs. So programs for adults, workplace learning, workshops, online courses, things like that. And I'd been doing it the same way for a really long time. And I guess it was at the beginning of COVID when I had a little more time on my hands and a little more opportunity to reflect and think about what I've been doing. I realized that slowly over time, probably over the last 10 or 15 years, I've become more and more interested in the emotional aspect of learning. So, what do people go through? Learning, if it's meaningful, is quite transformative because you start here and then you end up over there. And some of it can be self directed and some of it can be directed by others. But you're asking people to take risks and take chances on doing something new or different that they didn't do before. And I think in my field, we underestimate the kind of emotional work that's involved in being able to do that and what we can do to support people as they're going through that process. So I wrote something about it, and I'm not exactly sure how the podcast emerged from that, but it did. As vulnerability kind of came out as a key theme. So I realized from my perspective anyway, that learning can make you feel extremely vulnerable because you're put in a position, especially for adults, as we get more and more
Mm,
worried about our performance, and especially in the workplace, we're worried about how it looks if we're trying to do something
right.
and taking a chance on doing it badly until we learn how to do it well, which we all do have to.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much what led me here.
That's really smart. I tried to do a Tai Chi class and I didn't realize how structured it is. And you will be, it's a vulnerable place to be, like into learning new dance and new dance steps. Like, yeah, you can be very vulnerable there. You know, did you read fairly recently that scientists have discovered that we have a brain in our hearts, that it's the brain, you know, we used to think, oh, just something that is, oh, it's heartfelt, oh, it's in your heart. It's like you're just led by your brain, though, and not your heart. You know, when people say lead from the heart or lead from the brain, that kind of thing. But there's actually a, a, uh, a brain within the heart that has us thinking. We are thinking from the heart in addition to thinking from the brain, from the head.
I think there's actually like neural connections that go from the brain. There's nerve cells in the heart, and I believe there are also in the gut. That there's a lot of different
Oh,
parts of the
yes.
body that have
Yep.
thinking happening
Yep.
in them, but in a way that's different than what our mind, our
Yeah. Well,
cognitive kind of
yeah,
approach to things.
you're 100% right. And, you know, there's no mistake that we say, you know, uh, what, you know, go by your gut instinct because there is that thinking, you know, we're also talking about chakras and different things, you know, you kind of get a little bit more, and, you know, Eastern ways of thinking than just Western ways of thinking.
I think that's fascinating, especially
Yeah.
if you're interested in learning. So that's exactly what we see. You're not just learning with your head, you're learning with your heart, you're learning with your gut. Your whole body is involved in learning in some way.
Can't separate it.
We try
Right.
to, though. We try to compartmentalize it and say, just focus on what's going on between the ears. And it's so much more than that.
Yeah. So, and I looked up vulnerability and you know, it was interesting. It says here, susceptible to physical or emotional harm or attack, someone who was weak and without protection. And I remember the first time I was asked to be vulnerable. And I thought that seemed like a scary thing because, that definition is kind of what we go by. Like, why would I want to leave myself open to harm, whether, it's emotional or turns out to be something that they can affect my life in a way, physically, not the body, but, my physical life. And and then it was put to me in a different way of like letting down my guard, so that was the vulnerability, just letting down a guard so other things could come in. And I understood it differently, and then I realized it actually takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that focus on open to harm that's in the dictionary definition is very narrow. It just means letting down your
Yes,
guard and being open to
exactly.
whatever is coming.
Right, look at the definitions, and that's what our world is like. A lot of times, there are things that are put out there that are harsh. They're more of, for lack of a better word, a masculine energy than a feminine energy. You know, um, it's more of a pushing than a receiving. More of a putting out than a receiving kind of energy.
Yeah.
And then to sort of dissolve an energy that we think may be negative into like embracing it and then dissolving it and then being able to shift from it.
Where do you see vulnerability in your work, either the subject or theme or yourself as an artist?
Well, let's say in the sense of when I was beginning in the earlier time, I think is where it is the most difficult, because let's say you don't have a something specific, like this artist, the filmmaker I was talking to yesterday. Um, she doesn't have a style yet. She doesn't know what her style is, and that's what a lot of teachers or mentors will tell you. You have a certain style, so people know they're going to come to you for that style to tell a story. And I get that. I understand that. But at the same time, in order to create a style, and this isn't black and white. I'm not going to say this is black and white. Somebody might just start a style right away because that's how they're focused. But most people, Picasso being one of them, is you study all different types of uh, forms of art. He studied all of the masters at the time, and he perfected each style. And then, having that expertise, he then became quote unquote Picasso, because he had done it all, and then he knew he could then, like we were saying in the beginning, you have a foundation, and then you can break that foundation and then create a new foundation for yourself. So in the beginning, for me, a teacher of mine said, well, you're all over. You're doing abstract, you're doing street, you're doing conceptual, you're doing surreal, you're doing pop culture, you're doing color, you're doing black and white. And sure, it is all around. But and I didn't know what I was doing, other than I was following my intuition and doing what felt right to me. So it's that was pretty vulnerable, because I'm being told that, well, you're not going to get anywhere. So I had to have the courage to follow my own instincts and make my own road. And then when you put the work out, as most artists will say, you can be criticized by the work. A true artist is making work from their heart. They're doing something that they have to make. And we're not doing it because we want people to like it. They really will or they won't. And the funny thing is, and I'm stuttering about it, but an insult is, oh, that's pretty. Even if they like it. And if they say it's pretty, it's like, okay, thank you.
Not what I was going for.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So yeah, so that's vulnerable. I guess the other thing about being vulnerable is we're influenced by everything we see. And, as we were talking about, when you even take a look at the work, it all comes to that moment of how, as a viewer, you're going to interpret it. We're influenced by music, by plays, by books, by paintings, by films, by photography, by the news. We're conversations, everything that we see. Even look at the design in a house. The architecture of a home, the architecture of a building. Things come to us, and then they filter through us. Everything does influence us in one way or another. As other artists have said to me, and teachers, it's like, it's all been done before, but has it been done by you? And how do you make it with your thumbprint? I'm using text in a documentary that I'm doing right now. It's a surreal, unconventional documentary, and it's a story about my sister and my nephew. He has Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which is a rare incurable form of epilepsy. And my sister is his caregiver and has been, obviously since he was born, but he's now, 28. And she's been, she's a single mom, has been, I think since he was 12, I think. And it's all on her shoulders. And so the project that I'm doing initially just started, and that was very organic. But it started out as a straight documentary, but I knew it had to be more because David is nonverbal and has minimal communication. So it had to have a surreal aspect because we don't know what he thinks and sees and feels. We don't know when he's in pain, even. Because I meditate, and so I'm interested in the spiritual aspect. And we've been told that he's actually a healer working on other planes, which is really awesome. And I love that. And it ended up that I wanted to use text in some of the images, and I wanted to use my sister's description of what life was like. And so many photographers have used text before in their work, but how do I make it mine? How do I make it mine? And so I first started with just, mechanical font, but then I asked her to write it. And so now I have her handwriting. And then how do I use it within the images and not how to just like, other people, but it's been before. And, am I influenced by Dwayne Michaels? 1,000%. There are many other photographers whose work that I've seen. Dwayne Michaels was the first and the most, I would say, influential, and but it's very different still because this is mine, and it's great to know whose shoulders we stand upon.
As somebody did before them and somebody did before them, so that whole long
Exactly.
line of influences.
Yeah.
What came to mind when you were describing that, because I've seen a few of the images from that project. So I remember seeing one that had the handwriting overlaying the photograph. And so it just made me think just now about your double exposure. So it's almost like a double exposure, but it's in two media. So it's two things happening, one laid over the other. And it helps create the context. The text does for the photo and the photo does for the text, in the way that your other sets of two photos can create some kind of different context together. Or when you're describing before about the sound, the recordings that you would over that. So those are all like layered, almost double exposures, but with different media. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And with David's, I go really far out, like making it surreal. And all of it is because there are so many elements of what is going on in the brain that we don't know, that I'm tweaking that. I'm, touching those points for people to think about it. And right now, actually, I'm prepping for a solo exhibition with this project. It's going to be up for 6 months. And what's so cool about it is it's at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. And it's just outside Denver in Aurora. And it's going to be shown next to another solo exhibition, which is about the science of the brain. It's an immersive exhibition. It's got paintings and sculptures and all different crazy things that are, I'm going to say it again, about the science of the brain. And then when you walk into my show, it's called 1000. When you walk into that show, it's showing the human aspects of what happens when the brain misfires.
Right.
And it shows the human aspect of caring for one who needs to be cared for, and what it's like being the one who's doing the caring as well.
Oh, we've got the brain part and the thinking heart part in a way.
There we go.
In balance.
There we go. It comes back to that. Exactly. And something pretty fascinating. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, being a film student and now, this photographer. My sister and I, because we collaborate obviously on that project 1000, her name is Lori Sandler. We've been asked by Harvard Medical School to speak on their epilepsy symposium next year and to present the work so they can show it to their students. It then will educate them on more than just the science, more than just the brain, and going to the heart that we're talking about. That's just so cool. Like, me, Harvard, what? That's so cool.
That's great.
And then I partnered with this guy. His name is Clint Carlson, and he's like the head of innovative technology at Colorado or CU Anschutz. And he does a lot of augmented reality and virtual reality and hybrid technology. And we're going to be creating all of these three different forms with 1000. And this will be part of eventually an immersive exhibition where the viewers will be able to get a sense of what it's like to be the one needing care and the caregiver. Because they're, like I was saying, David is nonverbal. So how is the communication happening between him and Lori? And when she's trying to administer medicine or food and he doesn't want to, or, how does that happen? So we're going to go in and create some crazy, fantastic forms of having that experience.
I imagine for your sister that caring for her son is a loving and very demanding experience. And I can imagine that being able to do this project with you, collaborate on this project that involves her son, and you, and create this bigger meaning from it, and to be able to share it with people must just bring her a lot of joy.
It does. That was one of the reasons why I began the project, as a way to support my sister. Her life is beautiful, and she loves and adores. She has 3 sons, all of them. David is the one who's at home, of course, and she loves him so much that it is easy for her to care for him 24/7. But it doesn't mean it's easy. And she's had to learn to be okay, even if her son isn't okay. This project was a way of, I'm going to say alchemy. I'm going to use the word alchemy, and shifting from one sort of physical, mental, emotional way of being in an experience and shifting it into something else where we can help people. Not only does it help her, and by the way, I should let you know that I asked David, first I asked Lori if we could do this. And then I asked David, not knowing how he would respond, because we talk about agency, this is an important thing. And David is, he won't answer your question, even if you say, "Are you hungry?" There's nothing like that. and so he turns his head a lot from side to side. And when I asked him and said, David, I would honor you with these images and respect you with these images. And I said, what we wanted to do is like creating awareness about LGS. I said, David, can we do this? Are you okay if I photograph you? And he stopped moving his head and he leaned in, Sarah, really close and held my gaze. It seemed like for 10 seconds, which, if you get a quarter of a second, it's amazing. But he stared and looked right into me. And my sister and I, after he leaned back, and my sister and I looked at each other and we're like, holy shit, we got our yes. And even now, we'll show him pictures and he'll just sort of glance. He'll smile. He smiles. So he knows. He knows.
I love that. All three of you. It's for the three of you and it's for everybody else.
Exactly.
To experience.
Pretty magical.
That's amazing. I'm tearing up a little. I have to tell you. I'm going to cut that out, but it's just to know that he knows, that he's aware of that. That's super cool.
Yeah. No, that's why I have those questions that I ask about him. I just wonder, like, where are you going? What are you seeing? Different people have different ways of seeing. Thank you. Really so sweet to meet you. And thanks for reaching out.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.